The explosion rocked the repair station at exactly 0300 hours. Danny Carter's coffee went flying as alarms screamed through the cramped workshop orbiting Neptune's largest moon. Emergency lights bathed everything in crimson as he grabbed the edge of his workbench, tools scattering across the metal floor. Through the reinforced window, he watched a freight hauler spin wildly, venting atmosphere in brilliant white plumes. His fingers flew across the emergency panel, killing the alarms. The station's automated systems were already deploying rescue drones, but Danny's mind was elsewhere. On his bench sat the reason he'd been working through the night, a small mechanical dragon, no bigger than his palm, its bronze scales dulled by centuries of neglect. The child who'd brought it in yesterday had said nothing. She'd simply placed it on his counter with trembling hands, her scales shimmering that particular shade of blue that marked her as Draknari royalty. Danny had learned not to ask questions in this line of work. The outer rim attracted all kinds, and a good mechanic kept his mouth shut and his hands steady. He picked up the dragon toy carefully, examining the intricate gearwork visible through a crack in its chest. Whoever had built this understood mechanics at a level that made human engineering look primitive. The gears weren't just gears, they were quantum-linked, each one affecting the others across dimensions he could barely comprehend. But they were stuck, frozen in place by some kind of energy discharge that had fused several components together. The freight hauler outside had stabilized. Station security would handle it. Danny returned his attention to the dragon, activating his micro-torch. The Draknari were known for two things across the galaxy, their pride and their memory. They never forgot a slight, and they never forgot a kindness. This toy meant something. His hands moved with practiced precision, heating the fused components just enough to separate them without damaging the quantum links. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the station's climate control. One wrong move and he'd collapse the quantum field entirely, turning this masterpiece into expensive scrap. Outside his workshop, he didn't notice the shadows gathering. Didn't see the sleek warships that had been tracking that freight hauler, now holding position just beyond the station's sensor range. Didn't know that every movement of his hands was being broadcast across secure channels to a throne room 3-star systems away. The smallest gear clicked into place. Danny held his breath as the quantum field stabilized, then expanded, the gears beginning to turn in their impossible dance. The dragon's eyes flickered, and suddenly it moved, stretching tiny wings with a sound like wind chimes. It tilted its head, regarding him with intelligence that sent chills down his spine. Then it went still again, waiting. Just a toy, Danny told himself, even though he knew better. Everything in this sector of space had secrets. He'd learned that the hard way during the war, back when he'd been military, back before the discharge and the long drift out to places where questions didn't follow. He set the dragon down gently and reached for his polishing compound. Whatever this thing was, whoever was waiting for it, he'd finished the job right. That was the one thing Danny Carter still had, his work. Everything else had burned away in the war, but his hands still remembered how to fix broken things. The dragon watched him with ancient eyes, and somewhere in the dark between stars, fleets began to move. Part 2, the polishing, took another 4 hours. Danny worked methodically, removing centuries of oxidation from each bronze scale, revealing craftsmanship that defied explanation. Under magnification, he found writing etched into the metal, not Draknari, not any language in the station's database. The symbols seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them, a trick of the light that made his head ache. At 0700, his assistant Kate Morrison arrived for her shift, stopping in the doorway when she saw him still bent over the workbench. She was young, barely 23, with the kind of mechanical intuition that couldn't be taught. Danny had found her trying to hotwire a shuttle 2 years ago and offered her a job instead of calling security. "You didn't sleep again," she said, setting down 2 fresh coffees. Her eyes fell on the dragon and widened. "Is that Draknari work?" "Older?" Danny muttered, making a final adjustment to the dragon's left wing assembly. "Pre-diaspora, maybe. The quantum signatures are off the charts." Kate leaned closer, her scanner humming. "Boss, the power readings from this thing are insane. It's drawing energy from somewhere, but I can't track the source. It's like the power just appears inside the quantum field." 0-point energy tap, probably, Danny said, though he wasn't certain. The technology was theoretical for humans, but the Draknari had mastered it millennia ago, back before their empire fractured in the civil wars. "Hand me the resonance calibrator." She passed him the tool, her expression troubled. "That freight hauler incident last night. Security's saying it wasn't an accident. Someone fired on it, something with Draknari energy signatures. They're reviewing all the footage. Danny's hands didn't pause, but his mind raced. The child bringing the dragon, the attack, all of it happening within hours. He was caught in something bigger than a simple repair job, but backing out now would raise more questions than finishing. The dragon's internal mechanisms clicked into perfect alignment. Its eyes flared bright amber, and suddenly it lifted from the bench, wings beating in silent rhythm. Kate stumbled backward, her hand dropping to the pulse pistol at her hip. "Easy," Danny said, though his own heart hammered against his ribs. The dragon circled the workshop once, testing its systems, then landed on his shoulder with barely any weight at all. It curled around his neck like a cat, purring with a sound like distant thunder. Through the workshop's external cameras, Danny spotted them, 3 figures in environmental suits, moving through the station's main corridor with purpose. Their suits were civilian model, but they moved with military precision. One carried a case that his scanners identified as shielded, probably weapons. "Kate, back door now," he said quietly. She looked at the camera feed and paled. "Who are they? Does it matter?" He was already moving, grabbing his emergency pack from under the bench. The dragon shifted on his shoulder, its weight somehow comforting despite the danger. "They're not here for coffee." They slipped through the rear access into the maintenance corridors that snaked through the station's superstructure. Danny had mapped every passage during his first week here, old military habits dying hard. Behind them, he heard the workshop door explode inward, then angry voices in Draknari. "They'll track us," Kate hissed, following him through a junction marked with radiation warnings. The passage beyond was supposedly condemned, but Danny knew better. He'd been using it for months to avoid station fees. "Let them try," Danny said. The dragon on his shoulder thrummed, and suddenly the corridor's sensors went dark. Not broken, just blind, their feeds corrupted by some kind of quantum interference. Whatever this toy was, it had defensive capabilities. They emerged 3 levels down, in a section of the station devoted to long-term storage. Rows of containers stretched into darkness, holding the possessions of travelers who'd never returned to claim them. Danny knew a hiding spot here, a gap between containers where the station's sensors had blind coverage. Kate squeezed in beside him, her breathing ragged. "What's the plan?" "Survive the next hour," Danny said. "Then figure out what we're actually dealing with." The dragon unwound from his shoulder and settled between them, its eyes casting amber light on their faces. It looked at Danny with what he could only describe as approval, then its chest opened with a soft click. Inside, where its quantum heart should be, was a data crystal pulsing with information. Danny reached for it, hesitated. "This is way above my pay grade." "Since when did that stop you?" Kate's voice held a hint of humor despite their situation. She'd heard the stories, knew about his time in the war, about the experimental ships he'd kept running against impossible odds. He took the crystal. The moment his fingers touched it, information flooded his mind. Not words, but pure understanding. The dragon wasn't a toy, it was a key, a beacon, a test. The Draknari Empress had hidden it during the Civil Wars, left it on a backwater planet with instructions that only the worthy could repair it. Thousands had tried over the centuries. All had failed, either lacking the skill or the wisdom to recognize what they held. Danny had succeeded. And in doing so, he just painted a target on his back that every faction in Draknari space would be hunting. "We're in trouble," he whispered. The dragon chirped agreement, and somewhere in the dark, footsteps echoed closer. Part 3, the footsteps passed their hiding spot 3 times before moving on. Danny held perfectly still, the data crystal clutched in his palm, its warmth spreading through his fingers like liquid fire. The information it contained was reorganizing itself in his mind, making connections he didn't know existed. Schematics for weapons that could crack planets. Navigation charts to Draknari strongholds lost for 10,000 years. And most disturbing, a genetic marker analysis that showed him why he'd succeeded where countless others had failed. His grandmother had been Draknari. Quarter blood, enough to hide in human society, but enough to give him the intuitive understanding of their technology that pure humans lacked. She'd never told him, had died keeping the secret. But the crystal didn't lie. The quantum signature in his cells resonated with the dragon's mechanisms in ways that were impossible to fake. Kate's scanner chirped softly. She killed it immediately, but not before Danny saw the reading. 5 more heat signatures moving through the storage level spread out in a search pattern. Professional, thorough. These weren't common thugs. "We can't stay here," Kate breathed. "They're doing a grid sweep." Danny nodded, his mind racing through options. The station had 12 docking bays, but security would be watching all of them. Unless he could get to Bay 7, the maintenance bay where Kate had been working on that old courier ship for the past month. Nobody used Bay 7 because the airlock seal was supposedly faulty, but Kate had fixed it weeks ago and never updated the logs. "Can you get us to the courier?" he asked. Kate's eyes lit up with understanding. "It's fueled and ready. I was planning to test the hyperdrive this week." She paused. "But boss, we'd be fugitives. Station authorities will flag us the moment we launch." The Dragon made a sound like grinding gears, and suddenly Kate's datapad lit up. Flight clearances scrolled across the screen, properly coded and certified, showing a scheduled departure for Bay 7 in 40 minutes. The station's computer accepted them without question. How did it do that? Kate stared at the Dragon in disbelief. "Quantum processing," Danny said, though the crystal's information suggested something more complex. The Dragon could interface with any computer system, rewriting code at the fundamental level. It wasn't hacking, it was convincing the machines that its version of reality was correct. "Come on, we've got 38 minutes. They moved through the storage level like ghosts, the Dragon's quantum field creating blind spots in the station's sensors wherever they walked. Behind them, Danny could hear the search teams coordinating over comm channels, their frustration growing as their prey kept slipping away. Bay 7 was exactly where it should be, the old courier ship sitting dark and waiting. Kate had named it the Lonesome Dove after some ancient Earth Western her grandfather loved. It was an ugly ship, all angles and patched hull plates, but Danny knew Kate's work. Under that rough exterior was an engine that could outrun most military vessels. They were halfway across the bay when the lights came on. Commander Lisa Chen stood at the bay entrance, flanked by 6 station security officers in full combat armor. Her expression was carefully neutral, but Danny saw the pulse rifle in her hands, saw the way her finger rested near the trigger. "Danny Carter," she said, her voice echoing in the bay. "You're under arrest for theft of protected Draknari artifacts, conspiracy to violate intergalactic heritage laws, and about 15 other charges I'm still compiling." Danny raised his hand slowly, the Dragon shifting on his shoulder. "Lisa, you know me. I'm just a mechanic who somehow acquired an artifact that's been missing for 5,000 years, Lisa said. "Do you have any idea what you're holding? The Draknari Empire wants it back. So does the Resistance. Hell, I've got 3 different intelligence agencies bidding for rights to interrogate you."
She took a step forward.
"Make this easy, Danny. Hand it over." Kate's hand inched toward her pistol, but Danny shook his head slightly. Lisa Chen was a good commander, fair and honest in a sector where both qualities were rare. She was also a crack shot who'd won the Outer Rim marksmanship competition 3 years running. "Can't do that," Danny said. "The Dragon chose me, Lisa. I don't fully understand it yet, but I know enough to realize that if the wrong people get this, a lot of innocent folks are going to die." Lisa's expression softened for just a moment. "I believe you. But I've got orders, and right now, my orders say you're a security risk." She gestured with the rifle. "Step away from the ship." The Dragon thrummed, and suddenly every light in the bay went dark. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in red, but it was enough. Danny and Kate ran for the Lonesome Dove's airlock, their feet clanging on the deck plates. Behind them, Lisa was shouting orders, her security team spreading out. They tumbled through the airlock as pulse fire lit up the bay, scorching metal where they'd been standing. Kate slammed the hatch controls and sprinted for the cockpit while Danny strapped into the co-pilot seat. The Dragon settled onto the dashboard, its eyes glowing brighter. "Seal's going to take 30 seconds to cycle," Kate said, her hands flying over the controls. "They'll breach the airlock before we can launch." Danny looked at the Dragon. It looked back with ancient intelligence. He felt the connection between them, the quantum link that the crystal had established. Without conscious thought, he reached out with his mind, and the Dragon responded. The ship's systems came alive, far faster than they should have. The hyperdrive, which should have needed a 15-minute warm-up cycle, was already spinning up, navigation locked onto a course that appeared in Danny's mind fully formed. And the seal cycled in 5 seconds flat, explosive bolts blowing the ship free from its moorings. They shot out of Bay 7 like a missile, Lisa Chen's voice crackling over the comm demanding their return. The station's defense grid locked on, but the Dragon was faster, feeding evasion patterns directly into the ship's computer. They weaved through a debris field that shouldn't have been navigable, putting distance between themselves and everything Danny had called home for the past 3 years. As they cleared the station's gravity well, Kate engaged the hyperdrive. Reality twisted, stars stretching into lines of light, and they were gone into the infinite dark. Behind them, the station's sensors recorded something else. 7 Draknari warships dropping out of hyperspace, their weapons hot and ready. Commander Lisa Chen watched them arrive and realized that Danny Carter might have just saved all their lives by running. Whatever was about to happen, the station didn't want to be in the middle of it. Part 4. The hyperspace corridor threw colors across the cockpit that human eyes weren't meant to process. Kate had her attention locked on the navigation console, watching their course with the intensity of a hawk tracking prey. They were traveling along a route that shouldn't exist, threading between gravity wells that would have torn most ships apart. "Where exactly are we going?" Kate asked, her voice tight with stress. Danny consulted the knowledge still flowing from the crystal. The Ember Worlds, Draknari territory that went dark during the Civil Wars. Nobody's been there in 4,000 years. There's probably a reason for that. "Yeah," Danny agreed. "But whatever we're looking for, it's there." The dragon's being pretty insistent about it. The dragon chirped from its perch on the dashboard, and suddenly the ship's long-range sensors activated, showing a display that made Kate swear quietly. 3 ships were pursuing them through hyperspace, matching their impossible course turn for turn. The sensor profiles identified them as Draknari hunter-killers, ships designed for one purpose: eliminating threats to the Empire. "They're gaining," Kate said. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before they're in weapons range." Danny's mind raced. The crystal showed him options, tactical scenarios playing out in his consciousness. The Draknari ships were faster, better armed, crewed by pilots who'd trained their entire lives for combat. But they were also predictable, following doctrines that hadn't changed in millennia. The dragon had been created by someone who knew those doctrines intimately and knew how to exploit them. "When we drop out of hyperspace, I need you to trust me," Danny said. "Kill the engines completely, redirect all power to shields." Kate looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "That's suicide. They'll have us dead to rights. Just trust me." The hyperspace corridor collapsed, spilling them into normal space near a dead world wrapped in ash-gray clouds. The Ember World stretched before them, 6 planets orbiting a dying red star. According to the crystal, this system had once held 12 billion Draknari. Now it held only ghosts and ruins. Kate killed the engines as ordered, and the Lonesome Dove went dark and silent. The 3 hunter-killers emerged from hyperspace seconds later, their weapons charging with energy signatures that lit up every proximity alarm on the ship. Danny could see their targeting systems locking on, calculating, firing solutions. Then the dragon sang. It was unlike anything Danny had ever heard, a sound that seemed to bypass his ears entirely and resonate directly in his bones. The hunter-killers reacted immediately, their weapons powering down, their engines cutting to minimum thrust. On the comm channel, Danny heard voices speaking in ancient Draknari, their tone reverent and terrified in equal measure. "What just happened?" Kate whispered. "The dragon identified itself," Danny said, understanding flooding through the crystal connection. "It's broadcasting an Imperial authentication code. Those ships think we're carrying the Empress herself." One of the hunter-killers was hailing them, but not on standard channels. The signal was coming through frequencies that human equipment shouldn't be able to detect. But the dragon was translating, feeding the information directly to Danny's neural patterns in ways that felt uncomfortably invasive. The captain of the lead ship was named Kral Vex, and he was very, very confused. His orders had been to retrieve the dragon and eliminate whoever possessed it, but the dragon was transmitting codes that declared its bearer to be under Imperial protection, codes that couldn't be faked or forged. Codes that technically made Danny Carter an agent of the Draknari throne, whether he wanted to be or not. "Tell him we're here on Imperial business," Danny said to the dragon. "Tell him to escort us to the 3rd planet." The dragon complied, and after a long pause, the hunter-killers took up formation around the Lonesome Dove. They began the descent toward the planet below, through clouds that crackled with residual radiation from weapons that had burned cities to ash millennia ago. Kate was staring at him with an expression somewhere between awe and terror. "Boss, you just gave orders to Draknari military vessels? You realize how insane that is?" "About as insane as everything else today," Danny said. He was trying to sound calm, but his hands were shaking. The crystal showed him what was below, waiting in the ruins of what had once been the Empire's greatest research facility. Technology that made the dragon look primitive, weapons that could rewrite reality at the quantum level, and something else, something the crystal couldn't quite identify, vast and sleeping and very much alive. They broke through the clouds over a city of crystal spires, most of them toppled and shattered. The hunter-killers maintained formation, but Danny could sense their crew's nervousness. This place was forbidden, had been for longer than most spacefaring civilizations had existed. The fact that the dragon was leading them here meant something profound was about to happen. The landing coordinates appeared in Danny's mind, and Kate guided the ship down to a plaza surrounded by buildings that defied physics, their structures maintained by quantum fields that had outlasted empires. The moment they touched down, the dragon launched itself from the dashboard and through the airlock before anyone could stop it. Danny and Kate followed, their environmental suits feeling inadequate against the weight of history pressing down on this place. The dragon was already moving, leading them toward a structure at the plaza's center. It was smaller than the others, a simple dome of material that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Kralvex and his squad had landed nearby, their weapons ready but not raised. The Draknari captain approached cautiously, his scales showing colors that Danny's crystal-enhanced mind recognized as deep respect mixed with primal fear. "Human," Vex said in heavily accented English. "Do you know what this place is?" "The Vault of Echoes," Danny said, surprised he knew the name. "Where the Empress hid her most dangerous secrets." Vex's scales shifted to pure white, the Draknari equivalent of shock. "The vault is a legend, a story told to children." "All legends start somewhere," Danny said. The dragon had reached the dome's entrance, or what would have been an entrance if there was any visible door. It pressed one small claw against the surface, and the material rippled like water, creating an opening. Inside was darkness deeper than space, and from that darkness came a voice that made everyone freeze. It spoke in pure Draknari, words so ancient that even Vex seemed to struggle with the translation. But Danny understood perfectly, the crystal doing its work. "The mechanic arrives," the voice said. "The one who sees not with pride but with compassion. The one who repairs what others would discard. Enter, Danny Carter. Your trial has only begun, and the fate of empires rests on whether you can fix what has been broken for 5,000 years." Danny looked at Kate, at Vex, at the dragon waiting patiently by the entrance. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to get back on the ship and fly as far from this place as physics would allow. But he had never been good at running from problems, and whatever was in that vault clearly thought he was the solution. He stepped forward into the darkness, and the universe held its breath. Part 5. The darkness inside the vault wasn't an absence of light, but a presence of its own, thick and aware. Danny's environmental suit lights couldn't penetrate more than a few feet ahead, and even the dragon's glow seemed muted, as if the shadows were actively consuming illumination. Behind him he heard Kate and Kralvex arguing about whether to follow, their voices fading as he moved deeper into the structure. The crystal in his hand pulsed warmly, guiding him forward. With each step he became more aware of something massive ahead, something that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions his human mind couldn't quite grasp. The dragon had resumed its position on his shoulder, and through their quantum connection, Danny felt its mixture of anticipation and sorrow. The passage opened into a chamber so vast that Danny couldn't see the walls or ceiling. Suspended in the center, held by beams of frozen light, was a figure that made his breath catch. She was Draknari, but larger than any he'd encountered, easily 12 feet tall. Her scales were a deep midnight blue that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Even in stasis, she radiated power that made the air itself feel heavy. "The Empress," Danny whispered. "Not just any Empress," the crystal informed him. This was Kreshna the Unifier, the ruler who had forged the scattered Draknari clans into an empire that spanned 200 systems. She had disappeared 5,000 years ago, and her absence had triggered the civil wars that shattered everything she'd built. Historians had assumed she was dead. They'd been wrong. "She's alive?" Danny asked the darkness. "Barely." The voice from before materialized as a figure emerging from the shadows. It was Draknari as well, but ancient beyond measure, its scales faded to translucent white. "I am Archive Keeper Velshan. I have waited here for 50 centuries, maintaining the Empress's stasis field, watching for the one who might save her." Danny moved closer to the suspended figure, his engineer's eye automatically cataloging what he saw. The stasis field was degrading, quantum fluctuations destabilizing the matrix that kept her frozen in time. Without intervention, she had maybe weeks before the field collapsed completely. But the technology was beyond anything humanity had developed, beyond even modern Draknari capabilities. Danny asked, "There must be Draknari engineers who understand this better than I ever could." Velshan's laugh was dry as ancient dust. "Pride," the Keeper said. "Draknari engineers see the technology as it should be, perfect and unchanging according to doctrine. They cannot adapt when systems fail in unexpected ways. But you, human, you see machines as living things that break and need healing. You improvise. You repair. That is what the Empress needs." The dragon flew from Danny's shoulder to land on the stasis field itself, its small form somehow making the massive apparatus seem more comprehensible. Through their connection, Danny saw the problem. The field wasn't just degrading. It was infected with some kind of quantum virus, sabotage from the Empress's enemies during the Civil Wars. The virus had been slowly corrupting the field for millennia, disguising itself as normal degradation until now, when it was almost too late to stop. "I need tools," Danny said, his mind already working on solutions. "And I need access to the field's control systems." "Everything you require is here," Velson said. A portion of the chamber's wall rippled, revealing equipment that looked simultaneously primitive and impossibly advanced. "But know this, human. If you fail, the Empress dies. And if she dies, the quantum backlash from the collapsing stasis field will detonate this entire planet. The Ember Worlds will live up to their name once more." "No pressure, then," Danny muttered. He approached the equipment, his hands already itching to begin work. Behind him, he heard footsteps as Kate and Kral Vex finally caught up, their argument dying as they saw what lay in the chamber. Kate recovered first. "Boss, tell me you're not about to try fixing a 5,000-year-old stasis field containing an ancient empress with equipment you've never seen before."
You know me, Kate. I can't leave broken things unfixed.
Danny began interfacing with the control systems, the dragon serving as a translator between his human intuition and the Draknari technology. The virus was clever, hiding in the quantum foam between reality's layers, but Danny had spent years working on systems that shouldn't function, keeping the impossible running through pure stubbornness. Hours blurred together. Danny worked with the kind of focused intensity that made everything else fade away. Kate assisted, handing him tools and components as he called for them, her own engineering knowledge invaluable in understanding the exotic systems. Even Kral Vex proved useful, his military training including basic maintenance on quantum drives that shared principles with the stasis field. The virus fought back. Twice it nearly crashed the entire system, and once it tried to overload Danny's neural connection with the dragon, flooding his mind with corrupted data. But Danny was stubborn, and the dragon was patient, and together they slowly purged the infection from the field's quantum matrix. As dawn broke over the ruined city outside, Danny made the final connection. The stasis field pulsed, stabilized, and began to strengthen. The Empress's eyes opened, glowing with inner fire that illuminated the entire chamber. She looked at Danny for a long moment, and he felt the weight of her attention like a physical thing. Then she smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "A human," she said, her voice resonating through the chamber. "How delightfully unexpected. Tell me your name, little one who has saved an empire." "Danny Carter, your majesty," he said, suddenly very aware that he was covered in grease, exhausted, and probably smelled terrible. "Just a mechanic." "Just a mechanic," she repeated, amusement in her tone, "who repairs dragon toys without knowing their significance, who improvises solutions that trained engineers cannot conceive, who looks at a broken empress and sees only a problem to be solved." She turned to Velson. "How stands my empire, old friend?" "Shattered, majesty," the keeper said sadly. "The clans war among themselves. The systems you unified have fractured into dozens of competing factions. Your disappearance created a wound that never healed." The Krishna's expression hardened. "Then we shall heal it. Velshon, activate the beacon. Let all of Draknari space know that their empress has returned." She looked back at Danny. "And you, Danny Carter, you have bound yourself to my service the moment you repaired my dragon. Do you understand what that means?" Danny felt the weight of the crystal in his pocket, the quantum link with the dragon thrumming through his nerves. "I'm starting to get the picture." "Good," the Empress said. "Because I will need a mechanic who sees what others cannot, who fixes what others deem beyond repair. My empire is broken, scattered across the stars. And you, little human, are going to help me put it back together." Kate grabbed Danny's arm. "Boss, maybe we should discuss this." But Danny was looking at the Empress, at the dragon on his shoulder, at Kral Vex and his crew who were already kneeling in respect. He thought about the station he'd left behind, the simple life of fixing broken machines. He thought about how boring that life had become, how much he'd missed the sense of purpose he'd had during the war. "When do we start?" he asked. The Empress's smile widened. "Immediately. We have an empire to rebuild, enemies to face, and secrets to uncover. The vault contains wonders and horrors in equal measure, technology that could elevate civilizations or destroy them. And you, my unexpected mechanic, will help me decide which is which." She gestured, and the chamber's walls came alive with star maps showing hundreds of systems, trade routes, military positions. The galaxy is about to change, Danny Carter. Are you ready? Danny looked at Kate, who shrugged with a grin that said she was in for whatever came next. He looked at the dragon, which chirped happily. He thought about his grandmother, about the Draknari blood in his veins that had led him to this moment. Ready as I'll ever be, he said. And somewhere in the depths of space, fleets began to assemble. Old alliances stirred to life, and the word spread like wildfire through every Draknari system. The Empress had returned, and she had brought with her a human who could fix the impossible. The galaxy would never be the same, and Danny Carter, who had just wanted to repair a broken toy, found himself at the center of a revolution that would reshape the stars themselves. The dragon on his shoulder thrummed with satisfaction. It had chosen well, and now the real work could begin.